What are you going to see and to listen to is not something you will expect in this context. This is not the product of research. You're not going to see some results. You're going to see a model that we are using in Teach for Italy. We are going in a second into it. And it's a model that we built, of course, to provide us some information about students, about parents, about some teachers in disadvantaged context. But you're going to see the way we are using a monitoring, evaluation, and learning system that serves not just the goal of collecting data and information, but also something else. So you will be maybe a bit surprised. I hope not too irritated. I am very curious to see your reaction and questions at the end of the presentation. So first of all, I would, since it's a small number of people attending to this session, if I say to you monitoring, evaluation, learning system, or just monitoring, evaluation, what do you associate to this? What kind of concept or other kind of idea do you associate to this? Just a brainstorming, short brainstorming. Sorry?
Standardized assessment.
Assessment, okay. Something else?
I think monitoring refers more to the processes.
Processes, okay. Others? Okay, we can go a couple steps. Oh, that's a PDF, that's amazing. Okay, perfect. So I believe that normal, healthy people associate to monitoring evaluation systems surveys, calculations, meetings, reporting, scrutiny, assessment, we said. Well, this is what we use monitoring, evaluation, and learning at Teach for Italy also for learning, as instrument for learning, as additional instrument to listen to each other. But most of all, most importantly, to enabling voices. The voices of students, voices of parents, voices of teachers. This is Teach for Italy. I am the Deputy CEO of Teach for Italy. I'm not a researcher, so my perspective on this is more allowed to make this more political in this context. Teach for Italy is an organization, is an NGO. It's part of a global network, 61 national organizations called Teach for All. We basically try to send the most talented, we say, teachers to the most disadvantaged schools. We do so in Italy and in other 60 countries. Why we do so? I believe that it's quite clear. We try to give a boost or give a contribution to counterbalance or try to counterbalance some dynamics that we are discussing today about inequalities. The model is a bit complex. We are not going too deep into it. Teach for Italy is very young. So Teach for All as organization and national organizations related to Teach for All started in the US something like 25 years ago, roundabout. And in Italy, our operations are very young, 2 years. That's the third operation year. So we have 50 fellows currently. We call fellows because it's a fellowship. Teachers that apply that want to go for at least 2 years in the most disadvantaged schools in Italy. Right now we have 50 of them. We follow them and we coach them for 2 years in a very intensive way while they do their job in the schools. They have a coach, for instance. They have instruments like the monitoring, evaluation, and learning system to understand what they are doing, what their kids are doing, what their kids are thinking of themselves, about the teachers, about the environment and their well-being. We will go a bit closer to it. And we are located, or they are located in 7 Italian regions right now. And in the meanwhile, we have 13 alumni, so 13 people that concluded their 2 years fellowship, so the first alumni of this program. So this organization is very young and small, as you can see, and this is one of the coolest aspects of being in a very young and very small organization, because basically you can do things that normally more mature organizations are not possible, but not just because other more mature organizations are stupid, but just because we know you go there with a new idea and probably you are going to listen to a lot of people tell you, well, this is not the way we do here, or why are you going to propose this kind of innovation? We don't need it. Things are working already. Why do we need to change? So this is the cool thing about this. And when I started with Teach for Italy 3 years ago, I was asked, among other things, to shape, to design our monitoring, evaluation, and learning system. As I said, I don't come from economic study, I don't come from statistical studies. My background is philosophical, political philosophical, and of course I have a passion for this kind of instruments, and even more about what data can do if we use them in a slightly different way. So they asked me to shape a monitoring, evaluation, and learning system, and then I said, okay, cool, we don't have any base to start with, and okay, that's the monitoring, evaluation, and learning system I'm going to build. Of course, nobody, well, there were a lot of people laughing, say, what? Well, we don't use bad words here, right? So what are you doing actually, Antonio? Why are you doing this? What is that? This is one possible visualization of the principio di indeterminazione di Heisenberg, right? So Werner Heisenberg, back in 1927, understood or discovered for the first time that we cannot be sure about the position of an electron because in order to understand the position of an electron, we need to throw, or to bomb, let's say, that electron with other particles, photons, basically, that are going to influence the context or the electron position, and the velocity are going to be what we eventually are going to measure, not the position, or the other way around. So what I believed, what I think is that also surveys, assessments, when we try to assess or we try to monitor individuals, we are going to somehow influence the observed. We are going to influence this way also the context somehow. So my idea was, why, or maybe we can use this effect to our advantage. We can use this effect, for sure, not to make an electron reflecting about itself, but we can use this approach maybe to make our students and our teachers not just being the observed of our monitoring, evaluation, and learning system, but also observers at the same time of themselves. And an electron, again, cannot do anything like that, but human beings, luckily, yes. And this is actually the principle, the basic principle of what we call reflection, which is the base of self-determination, which is also the base of freedom. So starting from these philosophical, political principles, basically, we shaped this system that has this kind of components. That's why I called my presentation or my contribution hermeneutic, data hermeneutic. It's the basis, basically, of our approach. So the circularity of the data. The principle that data first belong to the people that generate them, first. Second, data can be useful to the people that generate them if we give them back to them, enabling them reading the data and trying to understand eventually what kind of changes they can ignite out of the information that they generated, but that maybe they are not enabled to aggregate and to use, to interpret. How do we interpret data as something, for us, as something like a skill? Well, you have way more advanced skills than I have, but I can use data to understand what is the meaning of that roundabout. But this is not a skill that is really spread. But this skill is very central in a modern society that is based actually on information that are based on data, and it's a matter of citizenship. It's a matter of giving to the students in the most disadvantaged schools the ability to develop other additional, very important citizenship skills. So as you can see, we start normally, as you normally would think, with collecting data through surveys. We go and analyze them in a classic way, but also using a technology that I'm going to show to you in a second. But most centrally, we give everything we collect back. And then, after that, we adapt whatever approach we are, can be the teaching approach, can be some dynamics within the classrooms, but we aggregate, of course, the data in a more higher level in terms of organizational learnings, and we adapt our programs based on what we learn, or based on what our students, our teachers, and the parents tell us through the data. So this is an example, because when we have a set of surveys where we ask students about their psychological and physical well-being in their classrooms. We ask them what they think about school, about themselves, about being learners in the classroom. We ask them what they think about their way to learn and whether they are aware or not about what kind of approach they use while learning. We ask, like symmetrically, very similar questions to parents to try to understand whether there are similarities, there are differences, and then we put together all this data, go into a digital platform. We call that Data and Learning Hub, where people, so teachers, students, parents, even principals, can respond or can basically use the surveys, but they can access this platform to see live the visualization of the data. Not just their own data, but also the aggregated ones of their peers. Of course, anonymously. And this is an example of what the users, so students, teachers, parents, and principals, what they can see or how they can see their data. So they analyze on their level, every stakeholder group analyze their own data on their level, but also in successive aggregation levels, up to the more aggregated level, which is the organizational one. And so in our management group, we of course can analyze all the aggregations that we need. And this is the most important for me aspect. When we collect, after we have collected the data, the teachers give them back, not just physically through the platform, which is an automation, but they give them back in terms of, let's give to the data a meaning together. And they do this with the students, they do this with the parents. And out of them, basically, they try to ignite the changes that out of that interpretation, that collective interpretation, has come. Last year we piloted for the first time the inclusion of parents, or the, this is a picture in a school in Turin, Barriera di Milano, where we basically, after the cycle, the teachers basically had a gathering telling their parents to come and to have a look together to the data, to reflect together about not just some disciplinary aspects or the marks, but about what were they thinking about their children's future, or about what they believed could have been the psychological well-being of their children in the classroom. And they did together with the teachers, but together with the kids as well, using data as base for the reflection and the interpretation. So last year, basically, we learned a lot of things. We learned a lot of things in terms of feedback, what teachers told us about using this method, these approaches, about what parents told us about that, and the same about the principals, and most importantly, the students. And we improved significantly using this approach, our program, at the highest level. At the same time, we saw in the classrooms, but this is going to be a project, but more scientific one for the next year, we are going to analyze what this and whether this makes a difference within the classrooms in terms of performance eventually. This is just a pilot, this is an experimentation. From the next year, we are going to test and to start trying to understand whether we make a difference, not just in terms of feedback, but also in terms of performance. Why we are doing this, I told you already. Of course, we need, as an organization, we need to have instruments that tell us what are we doing in the classrooms and how are we doing in the classrooms. But this is a self-monitoring instrument. But more than that, for us, is the ability and the possibility to give to our stakeholders, to our main stakeholders, a voice that is an instrument for change, and especially the change they believe they need together with their teachers. For me, it's about a matter of justice, actually. It's a matter of giving to them a contribution, or to schools in the most disadvantaged context, in order to make the changes and to counterbalance some tendencies that maybe the stakeholders in that context can, based on the data and evidence, ignite out of their own initiative, together with their peers or together with their teachers in their communities. So this is my bit different contribution to the debate. I would say that's enough, and I'm curious to hear for questions.